If Harry Potter goes back to Hogwarts,
Right.
he will be
Let's see how this goes.
in mortal danger.
Ron, look.
Oh, that's a bit loud, isn't it? Let's turn that down.
Come on,
Let's turn that down a bit. There we go. Right. Hello, everyone. My name's Chris. Welcome to my show and tell video. Before I get started, let's do an apology for my voice because it's just horrible. I am very aware of this. Don't worry about it. You're not telling me anything I don't know. Just be glad I'm not singing or doing one of those picture-in-picture videos, because then you'd have to look at me as well as listen to me. And no one needs to see that, really. If I was pretty, I probably wouldn't be in Game Dev. Anyway. So about 20 years ago, I was a programmer at a game dev studio called Eurocom in Derby in the United Kingdom. Our team finished Crash Bash, and then we moved on to the Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets contract. Now, the arrangement with EA is that we would do the GameCube and Xbox versions, and they would do the PC and PS2 versions. We would endeavour to share art assets like geometry and animation, but code would remain entirely separate. I think this is because trying to get programmers to agree on things is like herding cats, and the idea of two completely separate studios trying to agree on how to do code together would have been fraught with difficulties. So we did two completely separate code bases. So that's why anyone who's played all the variants of the games might notice that although the games look superficially similar, they play quite differently, and that's why. Anyway, in addition to being on the programming team, I was also the guy who did the builds for QA for the test department, and then later for submission to Nintendo and Microsoft. Now, Potter was made in 2002, which was a long time ago. I am now much older and balder and fatter. Eurocom no longer exists, and that Harry Potter title is of no financial interest to anyone unless you run a car boot sale, because I see quite a lot of them at car boot sales. Yeah, long time ago. So whilst sorting through some junk in my house a few years ago, I found what I'd labelled my Xbox Special Edition build, and what that was a version of the game that had all the latest code in it, but had the art assets rolled back to just before we were asked to remove the paintings. And because some of you might know, we had paintings of all the staff and our families dotted around Hogwarts, and then we were asked to remove them right before submission. And it upset us. I think it was a little thing that we'd put in, and they didn't want us to keep it. So I made a special edition build that would hopefully I'd be able to look at later, and I forgot all about it. Anyway, a few years ago, when I found it, I dug out my Xbox, plugged it into a capture box, took some screenshots and blogged about it, mostly so that family and friends could see what we'd made and what we'd tried to make, and it might be a bit of interest to Harry Potter fans, and that was all. Anyway, and then recently, someone from Harry Potter game conservationists got in contact with me and asked for more information about the build. I had no such idea that Potter conservationists was a thing, but apparently it is. So I said I would try and put together a video showing some aspects of it that you might not have seen before. It's of interest to almost no one, but it might be of interest to people who like the Harry Potter games, or people who are interested to know how we used to make games back then. And people who want to listen to me, which I can't imagine is many of you. This video, as you can probably aware, is largely unscripted. I'm just recording and going to talk rubbish for a while. I'll edit out anything dreadful, but if you hear lots of ums and ahs and awkward pauses and possibly some swearing and belching and farting, then that's just what you're getting in this video. Actually, that sounds like a disclaimer for the games industry in general. We do all right, but beware the belching and the swearing and the farting. Right, let's get started. I am quite sick of this video, by the way. one of the things about when you're doing all the builds and you're doing all the different localized versions is that you get to watch this video time after time after time. So I've watched this film a lot and in so many different languages, and now I just notice everything that's wrong with it and everything that's tacky, which is why you should never ask a game developer for an honest opinion about the games they make, because every game developer who's spent 2 or 3 years staring at a project for every single day hates it. They are sick of it. So yeah, I'm glad people enjoy playing this game, but no game developer will enjoy playing the game that they make. And that's upsetting, but there we go. Right. So this build is it's the kind of build we would have given to QA, because it allows you to jump between levels a lot and switch on a few debug and cheating options so that you can quickly get to bits of the game that you need to test. So let's just do the initial level in the Burrows and we'll see how we go. New game.
Welcome to the Burrow, Harry. Did any of you ever give a thought to
Yeah, I'm sick of that already. Sorry guys, I'm having horrible flashbacks.
car gone? Could have crashed. Out of my mind with worry. Did you care? Never. As long as I've lived. Dad got the machine from Gamble and James, so we could test the power of our spells.
Don't worry about getting the shield to the top, Potter. Once you learn some second-year magic, you'll be able to ring the bell.
That was truly smashing, Harry.
Oh, I hated that line so much. I always thought it's just cliched and ghastly and horrible, and because I was doing localization, I was very aware that if it didn't translate into another language, in other countries people have got no idea what they're going on about there. It just doesn't work. Dear oh dear. Anyway, here we are, and I could show you this, but if you've played this game before, you know how to play this bit better than I do, so I'm not going to bother. Instead, what I'm going to do is show you something that won't have been in the full game. So I pause the game, and you can see these extra options here, the level selector and I'm a big cheater. Now, I'd completely forgotten until I saw this earlier that actually I wrote that, because that's just the kind of rubbish that I write. So the idea is, when you are making a game like this, you want to be able to get to the bit of the game that you're working on as quickly as possible. You don't want to play through the whole game just in order to get to the, the chocolate frog that you're implementing right now on level 4. So we have lots of stuff we hide in the game so that you can very quickly get there. So this kind of menu is things like, gives us really good ways of skipping levels or cheating to bits so that we can continue with our jobs. So for example, complete current level does what you'd expect. It just means it assumes you've finished this level and moves you on to the next level. And that's really good for things like testing that the flow between levels works, testing that cutscenes play, testing that you get the right initial spells when you start each level without you needing to play through the tutorial repeatedly and over and over. God mode, I think I'd made that so that when the player runs out of energy, it doesn't actually kill him, so it doesn't matter how many times you get hit by enemies, you can still win. Show me the money, I think gives you all the beans. Fully loaded, I think gives you all the spells. Kill Harry it instantly zeros Harry's health so that you can check that when he dies the game reboots in the correct way. Remove bad guy, I think that's very much about context. I think there's certain times where you're fighting a boss, you could quickly kill the boss and move on to the next bit. And this one's quite a good one, the cheaty buttons. If I turn that on like that and then I back out of it, I can use the D-pad to do two different things. If I press up on the D-pad, it disconnects the camera from where it's supposed to be, and now I can fly around. So I can go up like that and I can start looking, and that's very useful for things like checking that your AI is behaving correctly. Or environment artists would use it for flying to a certain part of the world that they were working on and making sure that they'd fix things properly, that kind of thing. It's also a really good way of showing you, if you like, behind the curtain, because you can now see all this bits of world are missing. You can see all that floors just doesn't exist. The reason it doesn't exist is because we know that the player will never ever see it, therefore there's no point trying to draw it. So this is a really good way of showing you that games are all ultimately a big con. So I'm going to fly over here and you can see that the world is coming to an end. Nothing much going on there. Oh, quite a nice lens flare there, that's nice. That kind of thing. So you get to use that a lot, obviously, when you've got debug stuff on. It's a really good way of seeing what the game's doing. If I press up it again, we get back to the camera. And another thing that you can often do in game dev is you can actually transport the player in the same way. So you can I can move him over here and put him over here and do things like that. Now that's mostly of interest when you want to very quickly get yourself to a certain point in the game to continue, because that's what you're working on at the moment. And it just means that when I press down again, he will drop back down in there. So you can kind of easily transport your characters around the level.
There are gnomes everywhere. Ugh.
Look, they're up in the rafters. Okay, Harry, target the little pests and flipendo them off the rafter.
As you can tell, this level is very much a tutorial on simple combat and how to fight enemies and how to dodge them. So what you do, and every so often, the first time you pick up a bean and the first time you pick up a wizard card later, you get pop-ups to tell you all about them. So if you hold down left trigger, then you go in targeting mode and it sticks a target around the character that's closest, that's most accessible, and then left and right on the thumbstick puts you in strafing mode. Anyway, I'm already sick of that, so let's use a cheater and go just complete the level. So now what we've skipped is the end of the level, which involved that cutscene about using the flue powder to go in the fireplace, and the beginning of this level is about us accidentally coming out of the wrong fireplace and ending up in a creepy shop called Borgin and Burke's. And this is one of the levels that I had responsibility of, so I'm having horrible flashbacks now. So there's places you can ransack, because obviously in the finest gaming tradition it's perfectly fine for you to root through all kinds of cupboards and basically do Harry Potter-esque petty larceny, because that's fine. Things screaming there, that's nice, thank you. And then we have this creepy looking case here, which is actually the gateway into the next area. But what happens is when you trigger it, it will actually start the cutscene where Malfoy and his dad come into the shop.
It's Lucius and Draco Malfoy.
Touch nothing, Draco. Ah, Mr. Ball.
Never thought the voice acting in this game was going to win many Oscars, I have to say. But what you guys will have never heard, and sadly I've got no evidence of it, is that before we had voice actor recording for this script, we got members of staff to record some of these lines. So I heard a lot of my colleagues for quite a lot of the recording of this every time we were testing it, and the voices we used were really not right at all. So Mr. Borgin originally was voiced by our audio director called Steve, who was a lovely guy and had a very nice voice, and he he just couldn't do evil, so he came across as the most pleasant seller of black magic materials you've ever heard, so that didn't quite work. Oh yeah, that's right, I remember now. You're supposed to get Lumos, aren't you? Because Lumos lights things up, but it also reveals doorways. So what you have to do is you have to sneak up to this spell book, and you gain Lumos from this. The Remember All user interface, I seem to recall we were very keen on one of the Zelda games at the time, possibly on the N64, and I think the phrase was we weren't outright ripping it, we were using it as inspiration, I think is how we phrased it. Sick of that damn hand. So if I pull up the Remember All and I assign Lumos to Y, like that, and go back out again, in theory, there we go. So the idea is, yeah, using Lumos then highlights what you can push. Bit more shoplifting going on there. You see, I implemented this and I can't remember what you do at all. Isn't that weird? I think just the memories must just have been blotted out, possibly with a lot of alcohol. So not you, must be that one. Oh, that's right, you have to stand on the cage to get out of it then. Yeah, there we go, I remember. Oh yeah, I remember.
Here you go. Brilliant. Thanks, Hedwig.
No one knows how Hedwig managed to create a lad like that, but you know, that's magic. Cameras and camera shots and camera angles were one of those things we battled through right the way through the development of this game. So, as you can tell, there's periods where I can move the camera around with the right thumbstick and it will do it, so that's kind of a free camera. And if you use the left trigger, you can kind of flip it behind you like that. But then sometimes there's preset cameras for going through doorways and going up and down ladders, and some of the levels have a fixed camera, so it's almost like almost a security camera covering a room and things, and they were all a pain to do and to test in their own right. Do I have to go around there? I should remember this. I have memories of at one point we were having it so that Lumos would show you bad tiles. There we go. I remember, so they're the ones you need to avoid. And then, yeah, that's right. Again, fixed camera there, fixed camera out again. We also used this opportunity when you're going through doorways and you've got a fixed camera and control is taken away from the player. That's often the point where we loaded new sections of map or unloaded old sections of map, and that was so that we could continue to fit larger levels in RAM all in one go. We did that a lot in the grand staircase of Hogwarts, which thanks to all the paintings and things, would no way would have fit in RAM, but I'll talk about that later maybe. So down, I think there's a fixed camera as you walk. That's right. There's a fixed camera as you walk down here that kind of tracks you as you're on your way down. So I can't move that around. But there's a special trigger area covering that whole staircase. And if you're inside that trigger area, then it switches to a camera that's fixed. Nothing much going off in there. Oh, that's right, you have to sneak around the boxes, don't you?
Oh, look.
Oh, do I have to pull that? That's right. Because that's what passes for security in the Diagon Alley.
Number 5. Gulliver Pokeby.
And there we are, into Diagon Alley. Right, out into Diagon Alley.
Harry! Harry, we hope you'd only gone one fireplace too far. I was frantic with worry.
What's wrong, Ginny? You don't look
Harry's at risk of poking Ginny's eye out if she's not careful.
I went home, and I dropped all my things in the fireplace as I passed.
Would you like me to go and look for them?
That's so kind of you, Harry, but I think you'll need to get your things first. What was on your school list?
A copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, from Flourish and Blot, and a new potion bar from Mole Peppers.
Well, let's all go to Flourish and Blots then. Oh, and you might need this. It fell into the hearth when you used the flue powder.
Thanks, Mrs. Weasley.
Come on, Harry. Let's go to Flourish and Blotts.
So now we are at large in Diagon Alley. I think one of the things this makes me, looking back at this, makes me realise is when you work in game dev, you get to work with some really cool people and very talented, in fact annoyingly talented people, and I always loved this environment. I thought the environment artist made such a lovely job of it. If I detach the camera, let's have a look around. Let's have a look around. I think quite interesting to see how the world suddenly stops because we realise that you're not going to be able to see it, so there's no point drawing it. So we've got, a view through this grating here, so they've had to model the bit beyond it so that it looks like it goes further on, but actually it doesn't, it just ends. Got some really nice shot fronts. I just thought this was I always enjoyed walking around this. It was always a nice environment. So the Magical Menagerie, that was one of my levels. God, I forgot all about that. You have to sneak in there, sneak past the shopkeeper and basically steal something from a back cupboard again. But it's one of Ginny's things she's lost. It's a set of scales, I think, which is in a back room, and you have to sneak past the shopkeeper. I remember working on that. What was this? Mole Peppers, that's the first place you're supposed to go. Quidditch supplies crate. Oh yeah, oh, that's, in that case, there's Ilops around here somewhere. Might be that one. So, I've just remembered. So, when we were first given clothes, so the reason you notice there's some closed shops. The reason there's some closed shops is because we didn't need to implement those shops. There's no reason to go in there. But what I'd forgotten about up until now, yeah, that one. What I'd forgotten about up until now is that when we were given the Harry Potter contract, initially we were given the contract to make the Philosopher's Stone game, but on next-gen consoles, which is what the GameCube and the Xbox were considered at the time. So we actually spent a while making levels for Diagon Alley, but based on the first book rather than the second book. And I had the responsibility of Ilops Owl Emporium, so you had to make your way through Ilops Owl Emporium, get past all kinds of magical hazards, and collect Hedwig at the end. Then they decided that they wouldn't get us to do Philosopher's Stone because we would be releasing it about 6 months after the film had been released, so they weren't sure that it was particularly worth it. And at the time, other companies were making the current gen version of Philosopher's Stone for like the PlayStation 1. So we ditched a whole load of work and then started doing Chamber of Secrets. Now that bothered me at the time because it meant that Ilops had been a wasted amount of work, but actually it meant that we were still doing Diagon Alley, it's just we were doing different shops. So as a consequence of which, these shop fronts have been really, really well modelled because they were going to be levels in their own right. So that's why when you visit some of these doorways, you'll see that it says closed. It just made sense to reuse the modelling that we'd already done. So they are, yeah, they put them in Diagon to make Diagon seem more interesting, which it does, it works, but you can't get into them because we didn't need to implement those levels. And I'd forgotten all about that. Right, let's look at the staircase. There we go. There we are. So we wanted to, the player to feel like they were happy to wander around Hogwarts, and it was a big expansive castle with loads of rooms and loads of classrooms. So obviously the staircase and the rooms leading off it are very, very important. And here we've got all the lovely paintings, there. We could not fit all of this in memory. You just can't. So one of my jobs was to like a dynamic loading system, so that as you moved around the Hogwarts interior, it would unload bits of level that you don't need anymore to make space, and then it would load the bits that you do need as you approached it. So just think, so we do this with a combination of different methods. So one of the ones we did it was these doorways. When you enter a doorway like this, the control is taken away from the player for that period, and so is the camera angle. So if I do that, you can see you walk in there, you close. What you probably won't have noticed is that the camera angle as the door was opened was from above, so it only showed a very small amount of the floor, and then there was a definite camera cut as you entered the room and the door closed behind you. Now at the point that you approached the door, it started loading in this room, the room that we're in now. So that camera angle that you saw before that only showed the floor, actually the floor was all that was loaded to begin with. And then at the point where the camera angle changes to the inside of the room, it only gets to that bit when it knows the classroom has been loaded and is ready to go. So now we're in this classroom like this, and we can route through desks because, you know, more Hogwarts larceny. But when we move out of here and go out again, what's actually going to happen is it's going to take us back in there, and then at this point it's now unloaded that classroom, so it's no longer present. And we do that for lots of the classrooms, and we also do that in lots of the corridors. So some of these larger corridors that you can walk along, these longer corridors, what actually happens is as you go through the corridor, it chooses to unload bits of the staircase to save memory, and starts loading in classrooms that are in the area you are about to approach. And it works really well, and it was kind of essential on GameCube because there was less RAM in the GameCube. Xbox, I think, could probably fit most of this in, but we had to write it for the GameCube. Yeah, so this, although you can't tell, when we start walking along this area here, there is actually some trigger boxes in place that starts getting rid of the grand staircase, so that by the time we get up here, we've got enough RAM to load in the stuff that we need for what's coming up here. And it works really seamlessly, and I'm really quite pleased about it. Oh wow, I'd completely forgotten about those. Are they the ones that fart? Yes, they are. I'd completely forgotten about those. Dear. If I was to do camera moving, what can we see? What can we see? Right, so there's bits of camera, there's bits of room there, and that was where we came in. But if we go out here, it's all gone. The doors have remained consistent, but the actual environment of the main, so there's bits of staircase there and still people walking around, but the walls have all gone, and many of the paintings, because that saves us all the RAM. So if I go back down here, it's going to start loading in again, so that by the time we get to here, main staircase is all back loaded again, like that. And I was quite pleased with that. Right, let's go have a look outside then. So there was, oh, that's worth pointing out. So for animations, we had 3 categories of humanoid. We had children, we had prefects, and we had adults. And then we had male and female versions. So the animations for, you know, both these, for Ron here and for this other student, obviously look curiously the same. That's because they are. It was also quite funny because when you do animations for characters like this and they're just stood there, if they're just stood there static, they look quite boring. So you introduce what we call idles or fidgets animation, which just makes them seem a bit more human. So every so often you might see a character wave his wand a bit or scratch his head a bit. The problem is, after a while, there's only so many of those you can do, and when you see a whole room full of students who are all scratching their heads at random times, it kind of makes it look like Hogwarts has got a lice problem. So I think we trimmed it down a lot eventually, but you do after a while start looking out for, and it's a psychological thing, because you will start scratching your head reflexively because you've seen so many kids scratching their own head, and that's just weird. It's surprisingly difficult to make subtle animations work in a game that looks realistic. I also like the way that the sunlight coming through from the grand window up there is reflecting on everything that's walking around here. That's a nice effect. That's aged well. Let's go outside. Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, well, that's been a while. Nice flying pig sculptures. I like those. They're cute. So where should we go? Where should we go? We've got students stood around doing nothing. Apparently, in Naval's game menu, we can throw some names in the lake. Let's not bother with that. Let's do that. It can't be bothered. What else have we got? If we go this way. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you do teleports, don't you? Right. So I think initially when we were doing the designs, we had really grand plans that you'd be able to walk all around the Hogwarts grounds. And there's no reason why you can't, except that it became really, really boring. So I know people have complained that it wasn't like a free roamer. And it's not because it wasn't technically possible, it's because it was dull. So yeah, I mean, if you look at this, if you'd like to go hiking for the day, that's one thing, but if you want a landscape that's full of things to do and people to interact with, but doesn't distract you from the challenges you're supposed to be doing, that's really quite difficult. So that's why we teleport people around. It's just because it was really, really dull. Can't I go that way? Let me go that way. Yeah, thank you.
That's locked.
No, can't get in there today. No Quidditch match on. So I'll tell you what, let's go in herbology then. Let's have a look in the greenhouse. It's quite a nice landscape though, isn't it? Is Hagrid's hut over there? I can't remember. Yeah, there we go. There we go. I remember. Nice. Whoa. Right. Let's see what else. What else I can show you. What else we got in here? I don't want to show you things that you can already see from playing the game, really, because that's... Oh, I'll show you that one. So, it's quite common in games to have a white room, which is like a completely unadorned room where you can test the player's ability to move around it. So you might have quite known values for heights for things that the player can jump up or step up or climb up. And what you might do is, to help work with the animators, is that you might make a room like this where you can test all that stuff working. So as you can see, an artist has made a very simple room, put a graph paper pattern all around it, and done these steps we can get up. So if we go over to this one, what happens? We can vault over that one. And this one, we can climb up on top of like that. We can pan around it. Oh, what else can we do? Yeah, vaulting over that one. And then we've got steps up here. So we can climb up there. And then we can pull ourselves up there. Harry is a bit of a Lara Croft, really. And then up here you can just make out we've got a ledge there, so presumably this is a wall sneak area. It is indeed. So if we now stick to the wall, we can move across it like there. So that's demonstrating that the animation's working alright, and it's demonstrating to the people who make the levels that this is how you place things in the world so that you can do wall sneaking and jumping and that kind of things. And that's what the purpose of this room is. Got some gaps there, presumably to show that Harry can jump over bits. Oh, and can wobble. Like that. And that demonstrates that if he falls from too high a height, it should take energy off him and throw some of his beans around. He also looks like it would have been senior programmer who was doing this kind of work. It looks like he was also doing some pickup work as well, because there's various wizard cards and zappable curtains and things that he's left around in here to test what he was doing. There's a button over there which might have a job, or might just be... Can we press it? Yes, we can. What does it do? Who knows? No idea. What else has it got in this? If we go free camera now, what else has this map got in it? Oh, we've got nothing over there, but we've got all the rooms over here with a ladder in it. So for testing, you can get up and down ladders. That would have been for crawling through crawling through small spaces. And a door there for testing that we can open and close doors and do camera angles, presumably, and more different chests to route through. So that was what this map was used for. What other ones we got? Oh yeah, they've got these test maps here. So it's very common, you know, you're a programmer, you get given a few things to make, a few animations to do, or enemy characters to make, or switches that need clicking. So you kind of make your own test map, and then you drop those things in your test map, and you can work on those in isolation, and then when they're ready to go, you can hand them over to someone else and they can put them in the proper maps. So I mean, this was my test map. Let's have a look what was in here, because I can't remember. Oh yeah, I do remember. Okay, so this big room you can see is, I think, the first room that the artist made when we were just starting to make the Harry Potter characters and have them be able to run around and go up slopes, which is why there's a big slope there and why there's a balcony up there and things. And then this becomes kind of a big general purpose arena, and then every programmer made their own copy of it and dropped their own things in. So these characters here are stood there because I did some of the work involved in characters who would stand and wait for you and then would turn to face you as you approached and would engage you in conversation. So if I was to approach one of the characters from behind, you'll see that when they get closer they turn around and they face you, and you get then a prompt on the right because you can talk to them, and then as you walk away they'll go back to idling and they'll go back to doing their own thing. So we use that kind of mechanism quite a lot in Harry Potter. And another one here. Yep, let's just turn around and face me, and then we'll goes and does her own thing. Like that. Also in this room, as you can tell, are all the paintings that I really enjoyed looking at, and I obviously spent a bit of time just sticking them on the wall in my test room right near the end of the project. So those are the different members of staff who worked on Harry Potter. Some happy memories there. Now remember, this was 20 years ago, so I know for a fact that there's a couple of young children in some of these paintings who are now both married and moved away. And I also know that there's people in these paintings who are sadly no longer with us. And I didn't realise how upsetting I found that until I'm now looking at these paintings. So there's the thing. Oh. So that's, oh, this one here, that's Louise. Louise was kind of head of QA. She was everyone's big sister. She was lovely. She was very noisy, she was very in your face, she was always happy, and she looked after everyone. And she passed away a number of years ago, and it was a very painful time, I think, for everyone at Eurocom. We liked her a lot. Funny way you remember, isn't it? What else we got? Who's that handsome devil there? No idea. So long ago, I had so much to live for. That there is Lord Back, Steve Back, who was a 8 and 16-bit coding legend. He was a very grumpy and cynical man, and I loved him. I shared an office with him for years, and we got on really well. He used to swear a lot. He passed away in the last year. And that, I think, is about all I have to show you. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for indulging an old man for the last half an hour. Thanks guys for watching.